And here's why. A kind word goes a long way. Somebody's having a bad day and you don't know they're having a bad day, but somebody's really feeling bad and you offer up a kind word. Maybe it's just a friendly, hello, how are you? Maybe it's just taking a minute or two to listen to what somebody has to say. But your few words of kindness or your few minutes of attention could turn somebody's day around, might make them feel more worthwhile, cared for. Be generous with your kindness. It'll go a long way. People will remember, whether you know them or not. If you're in a crowded restaurant and you're especially nice to the waiter, guess what? He'll remember you next time you come in. And then guess what'll happen? You'll get even better service. When you give kindness, it's not gone. It's invested. It'll come back to you 2, 5, 10, 100 times. Kindness, it's so important in every aspect of your life. It's so important in building good relationships with others. Now, here's what else is important. Sensitivity. Being touched by the experiences of others. Being sensitive to others. Understanding the plight of others. Opening up your heart and your mind and your attention to address the needs of others. The people you work with, the people you live with. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Seeing, if you can, what's going on in their heart. If there's a problem, you've got to be sensitive enough to ask some questions. Not one question, but many questions. Sometimes you won't even get through to the root of the problem until you've gotten 2 or 3 questions deep. Most people won't reveal the problem on the first question. You say, Mary, how are you today? How are things? And she says, well, everything's okay. And you can tell by the way she said it that everything's not okay. And most of us don't want to come right out and say what the real problem is unless 2 criteria are met. Number 1, we're talking to someone we can trust. And number 2, we're talking to someone who really cares. So sometimes it takes that second question, maybe a third, and maybe a fourth, before trust builds. And the person finally understands that you do care. Then they're willing to tell you what's really going on, what's really on their mind. Gosh, that saves so much time, asking questions up front. Did you ever talk for an hour and then ask a question, found out that you just wasted the previous hour? Learn to ask questions that will build the trust and communication between you and those you work with. Learn to express, not impress. If you want to touch somebody, express sincerity from the heart. Impress builds a gulf. Express builds a bridge. Identification. You want to be able to relate your thoughts and philosophies and experiences to someone who'll say, me too. I know what you mean. You don't want their reaction to be, so what? If you're meeting someone for the first time, you're simply getting acquainted, making contact. Here's where you start. Find something you have in common. Find something you can both identify with. Start with where they are before you try taking them where you want them to go. So if you're trying to talk to somebody who's been stricken in the heart, and you've had this experience, you can talk about being stricken in the heart. And it'll mean something. It'll have substance. It'll have depth. And if you start there and then start building the bridge, you have identification. Then you start building rapport. And when you start building a rapport with someone, or when you want to enhance the rapport you have with someone, you need effective communication skills. You'll need the skills that'll help you work better with others to achieve their goals and achieve your goals. You need effective communication skills. Let me give you a few tips on good communication, because to be able to get along well with others, to be able to work well with others, to be able to live well with others, you must be a good communicator. Number 1, have something worth saying. Interest, fascination, sensitivity, and knowledge. Number 2, now that you've got something worth saying, number 2 is say it well. And you've got to be able to translate it so it'll benefit someone. You must have a good delivery system for your substance and knowledge and awareness and understanding and experience. Learn to say it well. And here are some clues on saying it well. Number 1, sincerity. The best communication occurs when both people are sincere, one sincerely wishing to learn or listen, and the other sincerely wishing to share. Number 2 in saying it well is repetition. Part of saying it well is simply practicing to say it well. Practice, practice, practice. Part of what I teach in sales training is practice. Practice. You start with something simple, and when you don't know much about what you're doing, practice is even more important. Let's say you're in sales and your presentation's not that good, and you wander around saying, "You wouldn't want to buy this, would you?" I'm telling you, maybe if you say that often enough during the day, somebody might say, "Well, maybe I would. What are you selling?" Now you can't say, "Mind your own business." No, once you've opened the door, you've got to go through it. Here's what happens if you practice in sales. You're bound to make sales. Somebody will say, "What are you selling?" and you've got to tell them. Maybe they'll want it. You're bound to get better. If you practice, you'll get better. You'll get better at your sales presentation. You'll get better at listening to your prospect. You'll get better at closing the sale. You'll get better at earning a living. Practice is just as valuable as a sale. Because here's what's valuable in sales: the skills. The sale will make you a living. The skills will make you a fortune. So, practice your presentation and your ability to communicate what you know. The people out there who say, "No, I wouldn't care for any," are just as valuable. Why? Because they took the time to let you practice your presentation. And especially when you're just getting started, you might want to pay them to listen to you practice while you stumble around. So, be thankful for the no's. Practice helps you develop skills. Skills make labor more valuable. If you just sell, you can make a living. If you skillfully sell, you can make a fortune. If you just talk, you can hold a family together. If you skillfully talk, you can build dreams and the future. The difference is skill. You can cut a tree down with a hammer, but it takes about 30 days. If you trade the hammer for an axe, you can cut the tree down in about 30 minutes. The difference between the 30 minutes and 30 days is the tool. And your best communication tool is your skill. So practice to get the skill of saying it well. Part of saying it well is sincerity. The next part is repetition. Now here's another part of saying it well: brevity. Sometimes you don't need too much, just enough. The more you know, here's what I found out. The more you know, the briefer you can be. Because you can learn to make words more effective. Jesus was brief when he was putting his team together. He just wandered around the countryside, and every once in a while he'd see somebody he wanted on his team and said, "You follow me." Now that's short. That's brief. Now why could Jesus be so brief and yet be so effective? Here's what I think. For all that he was that he didn't have to say. For all that he was that he didn't have to say. When you become bigger, when you become wiser, when you become stronger, you become a person of better reputation, so that when you arrive, maybe your reputation has preceded you. And when you get there, you don't have to say much. You don't have to launch into a 2-hour harangue if your reputation has preceded you. Your reputation will get a lot of the job done for you before you ever arrive. Next is style. Part of saying it well is style. Be a student of style, a variety of styles. Then make sure you develop your own. Be a student, but develop your own. Don't be someone else. Let someone else influence you, but don't become them. Develop your own style. Here's another tip on saying it well: vocabulary. You've just got to have a good vocabulary to say it well. Vocabulary. We can only translate for other people with the tools called vocabulary. If you're lacking in vocabulary, then you're lacking in tools to describe some problem or some answer. Words, vocabulary. You can't communicate without them. And you can't communicate well without a defined vocabulary. Every time you come across a word that's new to you, what should you do? Look it up. Every time you're in a conversation and the other person uses a word that's new to you, look it up. Now, most of the time you can figure out the meaning of a new word by how it's used. But if you can't, make sure you hold your response until you know for sure. Several years ago, some of my friends took a survey among prisoners, some rehabilitation program they were working on. And they weren't looking for this, but here's what they found. There's definitely a relationship between vocabulary and behavior. Interesting. This is what they found. The more limited the vocabulary, the more the tendency to poor behavior. Wow. When you stop to think about it for a moment, it makes sense. Vocabulary is a way of seeing. It gives us insight, and only with your present vocabulary can you see. You can't use tools you don't have to see, to create light, understanding, awareness, comprehension, perception, vision. You can only have as much vision as your present vocabulary will give you. And if you're limited in vocabulary, then you can't see very well. What if a person could only see the world through a little tiny hole? Can you imagine the mistakes he'd make in judgment? He'd say, "Here's how it is." You'd say, "No, that's not how it is. Here's how it is." The guy says, "But I can't see it." How come he can't see it? He doesn't have the vocabulary to understand the translation. Now, vocabulary is also what we use as a tool to express what's going on in our heart, what's going on in our head. Translate our questions, translate our answers, our perceptions, what we see, to be able to say it. And I'm telling you, if you have a limited way of translating and expressing what's going on in your heart and what's going on in your head, you'll fall way behind. So you'd have twin problems without a good vocabulary. Number one, you wouldn't be able to see. Number two, you wouldn't be able to express. And your world would keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, not having the vision, not having the tools. Finally, you wouldn't need a place much bigger than 10 by 12 to live. Why? That's about as big as some people's world is. That's all they've got, this little narrow world, making mistakes every day. Why? They can't see. Getting it wrong every day. They can't comprehend. They can't understand. No tools with which to translate. For good communication, number one is having something good to say. Number two is saying it well. And number three is reading your audience. You've got to read what's going on between you and the people you're talking to. Should you say what you're saying a little softer? Should you say it a little stronger? Should you explain it more? Should you be more clear and concise? Should you quit? A lot of the decision-making that's going on during a conversation with someone depends on how well you can read, how well you can tell what's going on in the minds of those you're trying to reach. Doesn't matter if you're looking into the face of a child or the face of a colleague or 1,000 faces in an audience. You've got to read what's going on. You've got to pay attention. So let me give you some ways to read. The first one is you've got to read what you see. You've got to read what you see. Search the face of a child and see if you're coming across. See if they look perplexed. See if they're getting it. See if they can't get it. Body language tells us a lot. Look at how the people you're talking to are sitting, what they are doing with their hands, their eyes. A guy's got his arms crossed, legs crossed, chin tucked down and frowning. You've got your work cut out for you. This guy's not going to be easy to reach. The lady's standing up from behind her desk. You've got to hurry. She's not going to listen to much more. You've probably got to pick up the pace and get down to it. So the first one is read what you see. Here's the second one. Read what you hear. You've got to be a good listener to be a good communicator. Get some feedback. Listen. To be a good parent, you've got to be a good listener. To talk well, you've got to listen well. That's so valuable. Get the feedback. Now, what you hear may help you change gears. Be a little stronger. Be a little softer. Find a different illustration. This one isn't working. Search for another way to say it. Become sensitive to someone else's words. Not just by preparing to talk when the other person's through. Listen. Pick up those signals that the feedback of words gives us. Now, here's the third way to read your audience, and that is to read how you feel. Emotional signals. You've got to learn to pick those up. Pick up those feelings. Women just seem to have this part built in. Men can learn it, but women have it. Woman says it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. Man says, what does that mean? It doesn't feel right. She says it's something. He says something, something. What is this something? She says, I'm telling you, something doesn't feel right. Now, men can learn it, but women have it. Learn to read your emotion. Learn to read what others are feeling so you can adjust your communication, so you can adjust your approach, so you can get your message across, so you can communicate well. Communication, having something not do in the marketplace. How you talk and act while playing volleyball on a Saturday afternoon probably isn't the same as how you'd talk and act around a group of people who want to invest in your company. How you communicate with your old friends and family members is probably an abbreviated version of how you should communicate in a high-powered business setting. When you meet a new group of people, you must watch and listen and be alert before you decide on the appropriate communication style. You might greet old friends with a slap on the back and a tasteless joke, but you certainly wouldn't greet a multi-million-dollar opportunity that way. You must take a few moments to study the temperament of your audience. Listen to how they communicate with each other. Watch how they react to situations and comments. Study your audience, lest you engage in some behavior that will prove inappropriate and costly. Some people would make about $150,000 a year, but they have to be satisfied with about $50,000 because their behavior is costing them the rest of it. They've got the skills, but their behavior is costing them. Keep setting them aside. So let's talk about some of those things in the marketplace that might cost you more than you want to pay. Here's one, bad language. You've got to be careful with language in the marketplace. You've got to be careful here. Some language is more appropriate for the bar. So what should you do? Leave it in the bar. Or else what? You'll have to pay the consequences. We must all be students of consequences, things that cost us, and language is one of the most important ones to consider. Language in the marketplace. Now, if you cuss and tell dirty jokes in the marketplace, that's acceptable to who? Other people in the marketplace who cuss and tell dirty jokes. You've got no problem with them. Matter of fact, they'll probably enjoy having you around. But if you cuss and tell dirty jokes to those who will be offended, then what? They certainly won't want to have you around. And what happens then? It'll cost you. Next one, being late. In some circles it's acceptable, but I'm telling you, most people view being late as being disrespectful. Disrespectful of their time. And if they feel that you're disrespectful of their time, they'll also feel you're disrespectful of their business. Why? Because everything affects everything. Now, if you have a legitimate excuse and your reputation already says that you're punctual, then you might get away with it a time or two. But be careful about being late. One day you just may be too late to close the deal. Be on time. You've also got to be careful about using inside lingo on the outside world. Your industry's buzzwords are just that. Your industries. Be careful not to use this terminology on the outside. People who speak computer language, they've got to learn to shift gears when they go out into the open marketplace. So watch your lingo. Remember to shift gears from the inside lingo to the outside world. You've got to become a good judge of character. Why? To protect yourself. There are shepherds, and there are sheep, and there are wolves. And we must be wise and understand that some wolves are so clever, they've learned to dress up like sheep. But do not miss the story of the full drama of life called good and evil. Awareness, sensitivity, understanding, knowing the scenario and being on alert for what is called the inevitable. We must learn to be a good judge of character. And here's something else we must learn to do to work well with others. We must learn to deliver criticism and express anger in a safe way. It's inevitable, during the course of working with others, it's inevitable that you'll come across some situation that'll result in anger. Or criticism needs to be handed down. It's just a part of life, that you delegate some responsibility, and through either a lack of good communication or a lack of good listening on the other end, it's inevitable that some situation will get you all hot and bothered. Now, what do you do with your anger? You can't lash out. You can't lash out at your children or your friends or your colleagues. But here's what you can do, and here's what you must do. Lash out at the problem or the situation. Honey, you say to your teenager, you know I love you, but what you did was wrong. I hate it that you took the car without asking first. And I especially hate it that you got a speeding ticket. What were you thinking? So whatever the punishment might be, make sure you're punishing the bad deed, not the person. Your assistant ends up sending the contract to the seller instead of the buyer. Make sure your assistant knows that you appreciate him, but you don't appreciate the wrongdoing. Whatever criticism you hand down, whatever anger you're processing, make sure that the one to receive it knows full well that you care about the person, but hate what they did. And if you're too steamed up to be this rational about it, make sure to keep your mouth closed until you've cooled off a bit. In Dale Carnegie's book, The Leader in You, he describes the attributes of kind criticism. He quotes Andres Navarro's technique of kind criticism as the 3-for-1 rule. If you don't like something about the way someone works, write down the problem. But before you confront that person with criticism, discover 3 good things about the person. Noticing 3 good things gives you the right to criticize 1 bad thing. Interesting thought. Criticism after appreciation. With well-delivered words, well-chosen words, you can admonish the doing without admonishing the doer. This is important. You love the person. You hate the act. Make sure they know the difference. You don't have to couch the words. You don't have to hide your anger or disappointment. But you do have to make sure that your communication is effective so that the wrongdoing will never be done again. And the more you care, the stronger you can be. This has to do with intensity now. The intensity of your communication to those you work with, those you live with, those you're close to. The more you care, the stronger you can be. If you really care for someone, I'm telling you, they'll give you room to get right on their case. They'll give you room to use some powerful language. They'll give you room to go right after them if they know that you really care. You can solve some sticky problems. You can attack the dark side of people that we know or working within a group of people that we want to know. Let's quickly go through some techniques for effective networking. Number 1, when developing relationships through networking, remember that they must be mutually beneficial. The favor you do for someone else is expected to be returned someday. For each contact you give someone else, you expect one in return. For each tip you give out, you expect one back. Or as the law of sowing and reaping says, it'll come back to you multiplied. That's number 1. Make sure your networking relationships are mutually beneficial. Number 2, keep the relationship active. Schedule quarterly lunches. Plan to meet at Chamber of Commerce networking events. If you see a story about your contact in the newspaper, clip it out and send it to her with a note of congratulations. Send articles that may be relevant to his or her career. Keep in touch. Don't just call when you need something. Keep in touch. Number 3, express your gratitude and appreciation. Make it clear that you're appreciative of the contact or tip that was sent your way. Send a finder's fee if your latest deal was the result of your contact. Send a special gift if a tip panned out. A man I know got a stock tip in passing from an acquaintance of his. Well, the stock made this man thousands of dollars richer. What'd he do? Sent a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 very expensive gold-rimmed crystal glasses and a thank you note. Now, he didn't have to do that, but I'm telling you, the recipient will never forget this guy. Number 3, don't forget to express your gratitude and appreciation. Number 4, keep your professional relationships professional. If it looks like jealousy is rearing its ugly head, firmly but politely, cut it off. When the relationship no longer serves you, no longer is mutually beneficial, step away from it. If the relationship you're building through networking appears to be harmful, take a sword to it. The 5th key to networking is to remember the other person's need for achievement. This is an important tip to keep in mind, especially when you're dealing with someone who's not as advanced in their career as you are. By respecting this need, by providing guidance and leadership, by sharing some of your personal experiences with this person, they'll end up bringing opportunities to you. Why? Because they value your insight. They value your experience. And most of all, because they value the time and the knowledge you've shared with them. Acknowledge those who are on their way up. You may just find out one day that it was your extra effort that gave them the boost they needed. So, with your communication skills in place, you'll increase your ability to work well with others. Listen, talk, share, sympathize, empathize, and when you extend your reach to work well with others that you know, you'll be able to extend your reach to work well with those you don't. You'll be able to develop networking skills. And once you do, you'll find that networking is an incredible way to increase your opportunities, tip by tip, contact by contact. And now recall the laws of sowing and reaping, of giving and receiving. The more you give of yourself in an attempt to communicate well with others and work well with others, the more you give, the more you'll receive as you strive to build your ambition. And here's the last but most important key to working well with others. Learn to work with others that deserve it, not those who need it. You must follow the guidelines of life itself. Life responds to what? Deserve. So work with the people who deserve it, not the people who need it. And here's what else you've got to do. Show people how to deserve it. How to deserve your work. How to deserve your time. How Self-appreciation, the sixth step to building your ambition. Self-appreciation says, acknowledge your accomplishments, appreciate your potential. Know that your appreciation of yourself and your achievements will continue to fuel the fire of ambition. Self-appreciation is an integral part of success. You must develop a strong appreciation for your own style, your own methods, your own process. There is no stereotype for success. There is no model for success. There is no such thing. So what exactly is success? Success is the steady progress toward your personal goals, your own personal goals, designed by you, not by the latest #1 bestseller on the book list, not by some philosophy that's imposed on you. Success is the steady progress toward your own personal goals. Success is not an amount of money. Success is not a bank account. Success is the steady progress of you toward your goals, the person you want to be, the things you want to have, for yourself and for your family, your business goals, your personal goals, spiritual goals, health goals, the goals that give you satisfaction and joy. To me, that's what success is, and my definition of success could be radically different than yours. So there's no one definition of success. You've got to have this much money in the bank, you've got to look like this, you've got to live in this kind of home, you've got to have this kind of financial security. In my personal opinion, those things have nothing to do with success. Success is your own steady progress toward the goals you set, daily, weekly, monthly, for your life, for your business, for your family, for yourself. If a man tells me, hey, pretty soon I'm cashing it all in, and I'm going to head for the mountains and live in a cabin and feed the squirrels and live off the land, I'm telling you, if I get a report later that said this man did that, cashed it all in, headed for the mountains, bought a cabin, is feeding the squirrels and living off the land, if I were to hear that, I'd say this man was a smashing success. So success is not some stereotype. Resist all stereotypes. There is no one model. There is no one set way. There is only your way. It takes a combination of philosophies and ideologies. It takes a combination of thoughts to mold and emerge with your own. We need the mental food that others provide. We need mental exercise. We need to open up our minds to different alternatives. We need to learn to appreciate the other side of the debate so that we can strengthen our own and defend our own. We need to expose ourselves to a wide range of thoughts and philosophies and ideologies. You've got to listen to a variety of speakers. Read a variety of books. No one speaker has all the answers for you. No one book has all the answers. You can't get all the answers from one person. We need a variety of influence to give us input, to give us ideas, to manage our business, to manage our relationships, to manage our finances, to take advantage of our time. We need a variety of influences. We need a variety of books in our library. We need a variety of tapes in our video library, our audio library. We need a variety of voices. And here's what else we need. We need a variety of points of view. Points of view can be so valuable. Somebody says, did you ever see it from over here? And you say, no. So you step over there where they are and you take a look back over here from their point of view. And you say, my gosh, I never thought from this perspective. It's so different. No wonder you think the way you do. Here's the clue. Take advantage of all that's available in terms of mental food and mental exercise. Be eager to learn. Always be eager to learn, no matter how far along you are in the journey, no matter where you are in your success. Keep that eagerness to learn. Gather up as much knowledge as you can. And then what? Debate it. Put it all on the table and look at it. Dissect it. Turn it around and stare at it. Ask questions. Make statements. Don't take it for granted that one person has all the answers you're looking for. Take their knowledge, but don't take it as the only knowledge. Make sure that what you finally do, the model you develop of strong appreciation for your own style and your own methods and your own process for achievement, make sure that what you finally do is a product of your own conclusion. That's what's valuable. Not to just go do what someone says without debating it. Consider the source and then do it your way. You can take an interest in what someone says, digest it, take notes on it, but then debate it. Look at it from all angles. Be a student, not a follower. Building your ambition is a process unique